Today is episode, and my friends are going to help me out here.
56.
56. Thank you, Michael. And today we are going to be talking about a little bit of intrinsic versus instrumental value. I'm joined by, I am Bray, first of all, joined by my friends Trevor, Michael, and Steph over here. And we're going to go right into it today and start with the question of what is value anyways. The topic is framed as intrinsic versus instrumental because these are two different descriptors of value, both meaning different things. And so I'm not actually going to go ahead and define those. I would like to hear from my friends here what they believe the differences between intrinsic and instrumental value are. And maybe if they have any sort of maybe real world application that they can think of off the top of their heads. I certainly have some in mind that affect me personally. But I'm going to go ahead and open that up for whoever wants to go ahead and grab the first baton, so to speak, the talking stick.
Got it. I've also heard like extrinsic, intrinsic. But yeah, so as far as the ways that we are motivated as human beings as we move about in the world and how we decide what we're going to do with our lives, we have motivations that come from an inner space, and then we have motivations that come from an outer space. But you're saying instrumental, so like instrumental to me is like, okay, I'm doing this thing in order to get something out of it. Like I'm not doing it for the thing itself.
Right.
Versus intrinsic would be more of, so it's not really the motivation per se, it's just like how are you deriving, what kind of value you're deriving out of the action, not necessarily a reason for doing the action. So then intrinsic value would be like you're doing the action for the sake of the action. So like maybe I'm playing a game for the sake of playing a game. Like I just enjoy that. Or
right,
I'm
like somebody could play a game because it teaches a skill and they want to use the skill for something later.
No, that's instrumental.
Right.
No.
Well, I'm like contrasting in that aspect.
Yeah.
Whereas you could play a game just for the enjoyment of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Steph, Trevor, any differing opinions there?
Well, I want to say very quickly that I was reading Bray's, breakdown about what he wanted to talk about today. And I want to comment that, like always, I'm going to try and bring some materialism into this conversation. And along with that, of course, comes energy, right? So all I mean to say is that no matter what or who you are, right, your energy is determined by what you're doing or what you have the potential to do. Okay, so like take the game, example, just as a kind of brief one. If you're playing a game to, just play it or to gain a skill or, something like that, there has to be a material component to that somewhere, and I think that if we tried hard enough, we could always find it.
Mm-hmm.
And like a skill, for example, you're investing your energy so that you have the potential to do something better later.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying there's like always a measurable aspect of value in this sense.
So, right. And we're of course going to talk about, intrinsic value and how could we measure that. And so, I'm really interested to see where it goes today.
Sure. Trevor?
Well, in the spirit of keeping things a little short, I have to say that I really can't press on or disagree with anything I've heard so far. These definitions are very robust. I really can't say too much more than, the intrinsic are things you do, in themselves, and then the extrinsic are things that are, we very often have a lattice work of intent, like you do this in order to do that, in order to do this, to do that, to do this. That's very frequent in a modern lifestyle. There are steps on steps on steps, and you just do things through a very complex manner to get to some other effect. And then there are also things you do for their nature of themselves. And there really isn't very much more to say about like the fundamental building blocks here. I think it's really quite straightforward. So I'll
Cool.
cut there. I'm interested
Yeah.
to see where we go as well.
Sure. So yeah, I agree a lot with Michael basically on the basic definitions of intrinsic and instrumental. You know, like I think part of the reason that I wanted to bring this topic up is because you know my degrees are in the humanities and liberal arts, for example, and I think a lot about sort of just the overall, I don't know, difficulty or just sort of the way that things like that are framed by a fairly large portion of like at least our modern society. You know, I was told a lot. I've been thinking a lot about my time in college lately, and I just remember, you know, building up to that, and even while being in that, you know, people tell you, you know, get a job that you can make lots of money in, and you'll be happy and stuff like that. And for me, there was a very important personal journey to go on to discover that that's not really the advice that I wanted to take, and I wanted to do something that made me happy and had to do with something that I was passionate about. Or moreover, I wanted to do something that had I wanted to get a degree in something that had intrinsic value to me, not just instrumental value that would get me a lot of money to try and purchase things that would make me happy, perhaps. And I feel like I continue on that journey every day, you know, and you know, learning more about where I stand, you know, politically or personally, like just in different personal beliefs and things like that. And so this is probably a topic that's been churning around in my head for a while. I just wanted to kind of spit out and let us kind of see where it goes. Um, so that being said, you know, I've worked as a waiter, which is probably one of the most like quintessentially instrumental positions that a lot of people could think of. Perhaps there's some people out there who do look at waiting tables like, I just absolutely love doing this job. You know, this provides me such a sense of accomplishment. But I feel like a lot of people are like, I'm literally just waiting tables because I need to pay my bills, or I'm waiting to get this, or you know, stuff like that. And you know, and this is my parentheses here, is I'm a waiter, but I am an artist at heart. I would much rather be doing something else. And so yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
Oh, sorry, really brief, but this reminds me so much of a Star Trek episode where Jean-Luc goes to a bar in France, in Paris, or not a bar, but a nice restaurant. It's like kind of a recreation of his youth. When he goes in, mind you, in the Star Trek universe, people do jobs intrinsic, that you do them to further yourself. It's an intrinsic society. Anything that you don't want to do, you don't have to do. And he goes in there, and then a waiter is standing there waiting to take his order. And you see that, and you're like, wait, a guy chooses. There's no payment. Like there's no salary in the Star Trek future utopia, and this guy just chooses to be a waiter. It's a little absurd, but at the same time, you can kind of approach it, and I do think this connects actually to the topic question at hand, to the sort of absurdist how everything eventually turns to dust, and you can fall in love with, you know, the things which will turn to sand eventually, such as being a bartender. There can be something wildly romantic about being a bartender, and there might be something similar to be seen in a. There could be something intrinsic to many of these things that you wouldn't, as someone who is doing it not for its intrinsic qualities. You're very hard pressed to find intrinsic qualities within it, but it could be found. It could,
Sure.
if we dig at it.
Sure.
Or Star Trek was full of shit. I really, it's one of those possibilities, really. There should have been a robot there. I don't know. There should have been a holographic waiter, because who would have done that in the Utopia? But
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
And so, yeah, and barring, you know, a long monologue from myself that's been done before on the podcast about, you know, where I think people should be at in society, I do think that there's a point in which even me personally, that I could find some sort of even perhaps intrinsic value in waiting tables, but I would need a lot of other things fulfilled first. And so it's kind of flip-flop. It's like, well, right now I'm a waiter because I need certain things, but it's like, well, maybe if I had those certain things, then I might say, you know what, I'll wait tables for a year just to do it because I'm not worried about these things. But tabling that for another discussion, I want to move on now because I want to ask about your values, Trevor, Steph, and Michael. I want to ask about what is the good life to you? What is intrinsically valuable to you? And I ask this because I'm thinking in sort of Aristotelian terms and sort of older terms. I've jotted down a term here you guys may be familiar with, eudaimonia, um, I'm curious about what the good life looks like to you. We did a whole class back at university on happiness, and that was one of the central questions of the entire class, was trying to figure out what exactly the good life was. Because I would imagine in a very good life there would be lots of intrinsic value. There would be you would be participating or doing or experiencing things that had value in and of themselves, not doing so much things just to get to a point, or something that was just useful as a means to an end.
Well,
And I think a lot of that has to do with, if I'm not mistaken, I think a lot of the Aristotelian thought on that was, leisure time, going and doing, experiencing, creating art, experiencing the theater, doing all of these different creative things. So I'm just curious. I'm going to pass it back off to you guys. Tell me a little bit about what you think the good life might look like for you.
well, so I wanted to speak here first after Bray, right? Because try as I might, right? I can't seem to, get any money. Okay, so so I'm kind of adulting at this point, where I say, okay, I'm gonna really have to figure out what to do with the money I have. Yeah, and so I wanted to comment here first. You know, I can't stress enough that um, we can't tie our self worth to money. All right. Um, eh, for most of the people watching the podcast or hearing it, or especially those of us who are on it, we're never going to have it. You know, I know that it seems like really defeatist or whatever, but the way our society's going, I mean, it's getting increasingly and increasingly harder to get it, and it's worth decreasingly and decreasingly less than it used to be. All right,
Sure.
and so on and so forth. So, what have I set my life around? It's so weird whenever we come to this, topic. I mean, we've talked about it before here and there, but every time we do, I think, okay, it's literally what I'm doing. Science, art, and education. All right, those are the things that I've set up my life to be around, and you know, those are the things I see as important.
Well, here I just to fill in a little bit as well. It's an interesting question you posited, Ray. I have to say, when we talk about money, I can't agree more with way Steph began by saying that you shouldn't tie your sense of self worth to the quantity of money that you may have possessed at this particular time. I would, when we talk about like what is the good life, or what is the good use of time, if I understand the central like point of your question, Bray. Um,
Yeah.
oh, well, I think, and this actually kind of connects to that first point that Steph had made. I think the best for me, for my intrinsic things, it's spending time doing things to further the my loved ones and the people that I care about. There's a certain amount of work that needs to be done to satisfy myself. I need a certain amount of room and board and the rest, but beyond some fundamentals, it becomes mostly a need uh, to to further the lives of, first and foremost, my direct loved ones, my family, um, my partner, potentially in the future my children. I find these things to be the most immediate things that I want to put my time to continuing, and then beyond that, it begins to be my countrymen, and then after that, humanity, in that trajectory. And I find that the intrinsic things that are worth doing are those things. For example, like You know, uh, when we speak a little bit about what Stefan had said, and I'll close with this. You know, like to not tie yourself to the acquisition of money or like how much money you have. I think I think the self-worth question is more so if you want to feel the righteous amount of self-worth is oriented towards the knowledge that you had done what you could on that given day. You know, everyone has a certain amount of difficulty before they go to sleep. Sure, like what did they do wrong that day? Those who sleep in bliss are often are occasionally the people that really shouldn't. But those people who have difficulty before they go to sleep, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I think for me personally, we're asking personal questions here. I sleep the best knowing that I did uh, what I could, and that's just for me. That would be the example of an intrinsic life, and that's not about the acquisition of money. It's the attempt. Failed, nevertheless.
So I want to ask you a question, Trevor. Is
But the
this
attempt.
is this life that you've described? I did what I could, right? Is it
Sure.
defeatist? Does it go anywhere?
Yeah, I would say it does. I mean, like, here's the thing: you set up expectations, and then you fall short of those expectations necessarily. But I think those, if you meet all of your expectations, then you didn't set lofty enough expectations. You didn't set lofty enough goals for yourself. I think no matter what, like, there is no finer death than in the attempt of the great and the impossible. You know, I think that
Yes.
I really hold that to be true. Like,
I
you
wanted you
are
to
going to
comment
die.
more on it for this reason.
I want to like really stress this that all four of us and the listener's loved ones are all going to die. Like for a fact, everyone you know will be dead eventually. Like that is a fact. And I find that setting lofty goals and lofty expectations, ones which you have very little to no probability of attaining, if not only slim to none but impossible. Those impossible goals are what, but for me, and this is a for me question, is what makes life worthwhile, what makes life beautiful. You know, like like at this particular moment, those of you who haven't seen Blade Runner, skip 2 minutes ahead. But at the end of the movie Blade Runner, the main villain of the film, I forget his name. His name
Such a
in the film.
powerful speech.
Oh yeah, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe, and then he dies, and his life was beautiful. It was. He was doomed from the start. He lived to be, I believe, 4 years old, and then he died, and his life was beautiful. And in that moment when he died, when he was holding that, I believe it was a pigeon in his hand, and released it right as his arm seized up and he ceased to be a thing or a person and became a thing. He at that up until that moment, it was, I think that was the perfect. I find that to be the perfect way to encounter reality for me. It makes it's the most beautiful way, and I think it's, since we're all doomed to die, why not make it beautiful?
Yeah. And you heard it here first, everyone. Like and subscribe, and you will get a seat at the inner table of Trevor's table of intrinsic value. Michael, any comments in this area?
Well, I personally just like, I find that community and being with my friends and engaging with other human beings and like fostering a sense of connectedness between people, which I've been doing a lot of recently. I find that gives me a lot of joy in my life, and my weeks have felt very full where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And I also get a lot out of organizing things and executing on plans. I don't know what that is exactly, but it's this just being able to get complexity and wrangle it and make something happen is really nice.
Sure.
Where those two meet, that's awesome. Setting up community events that actually happen and people come back and they're like, "Man, that was fun."
Right.
That's crazy. That's really something beautiful.
I'm going on my second or third week of Miss D&D session.
Yeah. Michael, I want to comment how how, and I'm not trying to belittle your situation, but how mundane, how mundane what you said is,
Oh, but it's so rare now. It's so
That's
rare.
what I'm trying to say is that, once upon a time it wasn't,
Right.
Right.
That's going to be a really good segue into the next part as well. And
The
Michael, unless you have
interesting
yeah.
the interesting part to me is that regardless of how rare it is, find me a person who doesn't have something fundamentally wrong with their psychology, who doesn't just find enjoyment in engagement with their fellow men. Like just it's a something that doesn't, the hedonistic treadmill doesn't like blow up the sense of community. You don't get used to being bored with hanging out with your friends. It doesn't happen.
True. Very often enough, whenever I feel that kind of loneliness that I think lingers on all of us, listener included, I usually just remember those times that I have with you guys.
Yeah.
You know, like Michael, you and I at that coffee shop, and with the rest of you a-holes at that crack house that
Oh
half
yeah.
of us lived at, with the broken windows and smashed in walls.
Well, that's what
You know,
I think is so much for me. Like sitting here for what feels like so long, but really is just a moment in the grand scheme of things. Which even the grand scheme of things is but a blip. But my point being that like I spend so much time thinking back on the time that I spent when really had nothing, living in just shitty apartments, like things falling apart, overstressed with work. But the best moments were just sitting on the couch with my friends talking about who knows what, or being up at 3 a.m. while Steph and Jake are talking about political theory in my living room, or and me and someone else are dicking around, or I don't. It's just those little moments that have stuck with me, and I think there's something important there. But taking all of this that we've said thus far about what we value, and me personally, I don't know if you can tell if you're a return listener or somebody that knows me personally, but if you do, then you know that I value sort of art and the artistic expression. I really value um, all different types of creative media. Any way in which a human being is expressing life, the human condition, different experiences through art. And that's a really flexible term. I really like that. And so, art is something with immense intrinsic value to me. And I want to push this into sort of reflecting from ourselves back onto society and the current state of affairs. So the next bullet point is, the modern political landscape. What is valued today in modern society?
Okay. Can I
You ready to
just
run with this one, Michael?
put in one last thought, which is
Sure.
like, that's the thing the thing about the whole like intrinsic so for me, and I think this just broadly applies, to tackle it from a materialist angle. We are like intrinsically programmed to value being with each other in the human connection. And so all of the other things that layer on top of that ultimately can come away as hollow in their extremes. So, seeking after wealth or material goods, or, these are not things that I'm saying there's some sort of like metaphysic to this. I'm just saying, like, literally, you are a being that is genetically programmed to seek out others of its kind and to be in community with, for your own betterment, not only for like better survival, but like literally for better survival, but you feel
Yeah.
good. And I think that's the important thing there on the day to day.
Oh,
But yeah,
absolutely. I
just wanted to
can't
pull
stress
that.
enough. Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress enough the importance of like I don't know. It's so much of my worldview is built upon what I would almost call like the biological imperative of the human being. like my moral foundations are built upon what is good for you as a person, as a human being, like a living thing. um and then of course all of these different like biological, like pre-packaged things, and that goes with, you know, just sort of like I said, the moral aspect, the social aspect, the intimate aspect. There's so many parts of me that I just look at people as a raw thing, and I go, well, why aren't we just building out from there? And that's part of what this question is, you know, if you are somebody that shares even remotely a perspective like that with me, and perhaps with some of my friends here on the podcast, um, how do you view modern society? And of course, speaking from an American lens here, what is incentivized in our culture? What is told when, you know, when I think back about when all those people told me, you know, go to college, get a degree in, you know, STEM, so that you can get a high paying job with these new and innovative fields, and you can make a ton of money and you'll be happy, just like all of these people who've been glamorized in our media for the last few decades, who are, you know, big billionaires or whatever. I mean, that's the American dream, right? With, you know, air quotes. And I put in parentheses here, what are you going to do with that useless humanities degree? Because that's sort of like a little quip that I've, you know, heard in different terms before. You know, when I tell people that my degrees are in theater, and they kind of look at me funny, like, oh, in 2025 you're getting a degree in something that, you know, might as well be, you know, like radio, or you know, any number of things. You know, it's like when you hear somebody's kids going to school and they're going to be a doctor, or they're going to be a lawyer, or they're going to be something like that. People, they see those big dollar signs when they hear that, and they go, ah, there's a successful person. But is that really the measure of success today? It may be in America that, you know, if you are getting a job in something that's going to pay you six figures out of the gate, that's success. But that's why I asked first, you know, what is the good life? What is actually going to make you happy, as a person? And I
Well, I mean, like
go ahead.
we should like say out loud, you know, what Trevor was talking about. Like really hit it on the head. When you die, your money doesn't mean anything. Okay, like whenever you're no longer here, you know, let's just take the religious standpoint. You know, usually speaking, in religions, the more money you have, the worse off you are. And I'm not just talking about the Christian notion, you know, the eye of the needle and all that. I'm talking about in most religions, you either take care of each other or you don't, and that's kind of where you would fall on that kind of
Mm-hmm.
spectrum. Uh, you know, on whether or not you did right or you did wrong. And so I want to share my answer here. What is valued now? Money, physical appearance, and ignorance. And, you know, why do I say that? Because in this society, all we're concerned about is that green dollar bill.
I
And then
actually,
we use that to change our bodies at whim. And then it seems like the more ignorant you are about the natural world, the more rewarded you become.
so I want to pick that apart, because the phrasing from you and Bray both make it sound very intentional or orchestrated, and it's really not. It's coincident. Um, to me, it's entirely coincident. It is. Value is an interesting word, but I'd like to prick apart. Survival value is more the thing. For a lot of people, most people live in a state of not having enough to be comfortable. There are a few people who live in a state of not having enough to have more than their neighbor, but that's more of a rarer issue when it comes to money. So when we talk about like the overvaluing of money, I don't think it's and aesthetics and, you know, who you are materially in your personhood. I think these things, it's hard to kind of like pick this apart. But do you hear what I'm trying to kind of get at with, like, these are not things that somebody has like at some upper echelon of the system has said we're going to orchestrate it so that people care about these things. It's not really what's
Right.
happened
Oh,
here.
sure.
Right.
Um,
I've never claimed that, we did it on purpose this way, but I'm
the
perfectly willing to say that we're purposefully continuing it.
It's really
So-
difficult to break out of that, though. And
So,
Oh, absolutely.
I was
Trevor.
going to quickly add. So our system, as it currently is, you've both, like Stefan and Bray, you've characterized it as this soulless thing, and I think power might be the best word to apply to it. Is circled around power. But I want to just say that, like, I don't necessarily think that we should look at this in a negative context. I know that sounds strange, but let me try to open that up a little bit. I think that the system as it currently exists, whether you say that's the system in the West or the system in the modern world, would be a much better term. I think it exists, in which, whether you call it capitalism, free enterprise, however you want to apply terms. I think it exists such that it is oriented around power and the furthering of power for whatever individual that wants to seek it. And it becomes much easier to get more power once you have already accumulated power. I think that's always been so. But I do think that that's the centerfold point. But I want to note here, and I know that sounds negative, but I want to note that if you orient it around anything else, you won't do very good for yourself or for your loved ones. So for example, I believe, and I'll check a statistic when I stop talking, and I'll return. I believe it's $44,000 will put you into the top 1% of the earth. So like the average American is in the top 1%. Could you correct me, Michael, if you have that on mind?
that's approximately correct as far
I have
as
no
annual
doubt.
income, but that doesn't take into account cost of living and actual spending power. That statistic
Certainly.
is almost
Which
useless
is
in a vacuum.
obviously
It's
gonna
one of those
vary.
Oh,
like
sure. Those the
it's one of those
Louisiana
like
thing. Sure.
bogus stat manipulating like PR propaganda statistics that I really don't like. But
Fair
yes,
enough,
it is
fair enough.
technically
So,
true.
But I will
Michael, I really
apply.
appreciate how you say that, though, because, like, even though $5 might be able to furnish a whole house in some other country besides America, the truth is that it can't here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well,
So,
and
the point,
yeah.
the
Go ahead,
reason why I
Trevor.
brought it up, yeah, just to finish this point, the reason only that I brought it up is just to say that life is necessarily immensely difficult across the earth. It's a very difficult thing, life. It is, and it's difficult to survive. And I think we need to respect the nature of reality as it is and as it has been. It's been getting easier, much easier over time, far before any of us were born or our parents. We have this sudden incredible leap and ability and the capability for us to change, manipulate the world, and live for ourselves so much better than any other period before. It could be so much better than it currently is, and there are a lot of issues systemic to the nature of our system, systemic to our system. But nevertheless, I do want to state that the nature of our system is power, and I do think power is necessary in order to survive. And I think the issue that we have right now is that by and large, our system, which is oriented around power, if an individual doesn't have a soul and regards and interacts with this system, by and large, is when you have problems that you and I see and we have issues with. But nevertheless, I think it is quite concerning to me when we start to orient, and I know this sounds strange, but if we start to orient our system away from power, we can find ourselves losing competence and losing ability. And I do find that to be slightly concerning.
I want to comment very briefly here on what you say, Trevor. And I know I've said it before, but like, we continue to do our lives, like philosophically speaking, as though science has not said some very measurable things about this. All right. Including, our words, right? You keep using the word power, right? But I want to start using the word energy. Energy is your ability to affect change. Okay. And power, in like the physics definition, is more or less how much affected change can you make in a given time frame? You see what I mean? So, we use these words interchangeably and whatnot, but I feel that materialism and science and the stuff that we have discovered have to say a lot about it, actually. And you're totally correct. I want to make sure that the viewer hears this as well, that life has always been hard. I think what me and Bray are saying is that it doesn't have to be quite this hard. All right. And, later on, Bray's going to talk about, why is art a luxury, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, that gets to the heart of the problem here.
Yeah. And I don't mean to present the topic in a way that suggests, that part of me admittedly is very much after this sort of utopian ideal where everybody can wake up in the morning and do just kind of whatever they want, so long as it does not adversely affect their fellow man. And I feel like, Trevor, this kind of, to me personally, is something like you mentioned earlier. It's an incredibly lofty goal that I feel like I necessarily have to set for myself, and not even so much for just myself, but for humanity. Like, I see a vision of a world that many, and my ancestors have done this plenty of times before me, probably since there was, the first man, quote unquote, this ideal world where you could just do what you want to do the things that make you happy, that have intrinsic value to you. I wouldn't have to wake up in the morning and go to work 2 jobs as a waiter just to make money so that I can pay bills in order to just survive. And by surviving, wake up and do it again the next day to continue doing that. I would have ample time in my life, the one life that I have, to do things that I feel personally are valuable to me, and not just a means to an end to continue existing. That's sort of this overarching theme behind this in the background, perhaps.
So, yes.
Sure.
I was going to say, so there are 2 kind of avenues you can approach that point from, Bray. This point about wanting to approach reality in a way such that you're not spending every hour of every day working as a waiter just to be able to return home and sleep and have 2 hours of recreation and the rest. If that's how I understand your statement, I think there are 2 different avenues here. One avenue, and I think this is the one that I think it has more validity to it. This is the way that I would approach that problem, and that is that you need more power. You need to encounter reality, become a better and better at it. For example, in terms of theater, you need to work like you have to put a lot into it in order to produce something to which a lot of people will consume it and then regard it and then grow essentially your energy. We want to use that term instead. And I do think it's a good term. It does remove some of the negative context to it. It's a difficult world. It is, necessarily, especially for a theater major or an artist, any artist at all. It's not that you can produce something that could be easily consumed readily. So, and I'll end with this one little last sentence, and then Michael has a point. I want to hand it off to him. But the other avenue that I disagree with, that I think is actually quite dangerous, is the belief that you can just get away with living in a world where it's all just milk and ice cream, and that you can just not, though everybody in the world can just not be waiters. I think the world, you need to have a certain amount of understanding and respect for how excruciatingly painful life is, and that you do need to put in something in order to get something out, and that you can't just if you can live your life every day as if it's just whatever it is you want, but the issue is you're going to live quite miserably because that is the world that you were born into before your mother named you. That is the world that you entered, and that is the world that you exist in. And I do believe that you can get to a place where you can sleep in every morning and you can live a life where you can just write poetry and literary criticism. I do think you can get there, Bray. I think you can get there, but there is a lot of excruciating work in order to get there. And I think out of 100 Brays that attempt it, 99 are going to die. And I'm not saying that that's good. I'm just saying that that's the only way to get the one through. The only way to get 1 out of the 100 through the filter is that attempt. And the other one will kill all 100. All 100 will die versus 1 out of 100. It's the excruciating nature of the reality that you were put into. Yes, and then Michael.
Yeah, I was just going to say something to that effect. I mean, power exists. Power is that it. I don't know why that has a negative connotation, other than some people are too unable to acquire power for one reason or another, for lack of application, for lack of ability. I don't know. But like this utopia you describe of being very leisurely is at once available to you, but then the things that you would probably also want to engage with are locked behind actual hard, intense effort, from your current standpoint, and hence the split. I mean, you could have a life of leisure. You can just live out of a tent, and hang around like a state park or something, or you could,
Right.
there are minimalist ways of, but then you necessarily volunteer to cut yourself off from things that take a lot more effort and energy expenditure to achieve.
Right. Well, and
And
that's
if you wanted in a
the
system where everyone had access to that kind of leisure time while still sustaining like a specific amount of material um, presence in the world, you would necessarily need a initial step where people who already had immense power use that to enact such utopia. That would have to happen. And if you talk to literally anybody who has achieved like a significant goal, like running a business successfully, or being in a professorship, or anything that you can think of that is considered to be like a medium to extremely hard goal, that has failure modes that look like you're homeless, you're dead, whatever, you're disgraced, I don't think you could convince any of them that like that is something worth like giving up everything for. It's not. There's a certain kind of like effort in the world that once you have put that much effort in, you see like, oh, it's literally just people don't want to put in that much effort,
But
or
so like I
can't.
have to disagree at this point, right? Because, for example, I would put the kind of work I put in towards society, like literally for exclusively society's benefit, um, up against any of these people that you're talking about. I would suggest that some of the people who we can find at the lowest rungs of society have put in a lot of this effort you're talking about and have nothing to show for it.
I
I like
think,
what you said,
okay,
that power should not be this thing that has this negative connotation. I completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have ability to change your situation doesn't mean you're evil. All right, I
so
completely agree. But
hmm,
again, and it may not have been intended this way, but in our current model of society, what you're talking about, those failure conditions of homelessness, death, disgrace, whatever, those are real for all of us, no matter how much effort you put in. I mean, but the trouble is that it becomes less and less real the more and more literal money you have.
so I don't think that there's an active contradiction between your two terms, Michael and Stefan. I would point out simply that when I spoke earlier about these two axes, these two decisions you can go down, either believing that the whole system can be overthrown for one of milk and honey, or one where you're going to have to work wildly hard in order to get something out of it. I think that that's still valid, even in the space, Stefan, of the point that you're making. I would just point out, like what I was saying earlier, this grand filter. This is why humanities degrees are so scary and terrifying for many
Sure,
people. It's
but
because
why?
Right.
100 artists, for every
Right,
100 artists that attempt to become something, 99 do not make it, and that's why these
true.
degrees are really challenging. There's if you want to become a welder, the pipeline's quite straightforward. It's quite wide. The pipeline needs welders, and it needs things to start welding, and that's why that's a less scary degree for many parents that send their children off to college, for example. So I would simply
Right,
point out that
but
there are
the trouble.
avenues of life that destroy you, and
Mhm.
but it is far better than the alternative, which will mean that everyone fails. You need to accumulate energy, or you will surely fall, and you will fail in whatever aspiration you're trying to attain,
Right,
either for
and
yourself or for your society.
what I'm trying to posit here is that we live in a system which extracts the maximum amount of energy out of you and puts it into society at large, or into, more likely, the hands of a very few people. All right, increasingly fewer people.
I
And
agree.
what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't always this way. And
I agree.
all I'm trying to say right now is that it doesn't have to be right now either. It just doesn't.
Sure, we're talking about the death of the American dream. I think
Oh,
all of us are
absolutely.
agreeing on that.
Yeah.
Well,
And I do believe.
let me just put this out here real quick.
Please,
You
yeah.
guys are talking a lot about effort, a lot about blah blah blah, but we literally made up, like whole cloth out of our heads, what that effort means and what it's worth. I'll give you an example. Bray is sitting here, still in Louisiana. Okay, Bray, if you don't mind telling us, how many hours a week do you work?
I work.
Just give it a figure.
It's been a while since I actually added them up. But I work 5 days out of the week in one of my jobs and 4 to 5 days out of the week on my other job. So roughly 60 hours?
Okay. So what I'm trying
Probably
to say,
more than that, depending.
what I'm trying to say to demonstrate how much we made up, how much your effort is worth, we just made it up. Bray could work no more than 35 hours a week up here in Illinois and get the same exact dollar amount. What I'm trying to say, and I think what Bray's trying to say, is that our society has made the wrong decision on what gets that reward for effort.
I believe that there is a pathway that we look at, we idealize as the American dream that has existed for a little while now, at least since the mid early 20th century. I would say the 1940s, post World War II. I believe that there has been such a thing as the American dream, and I believe that it was considerably less narrow than it is right now. For a time, people were able to purchase property and have equity and a stake in this country, and a lot more control over its affairs. I think that all of these things are true, and I believe that these things have lessened by the time you have the Zoomer generation that we have right now. I think there are serious and systemic issues to the way that our country operates today, and I believe you're correct about all of these things. And I believe that if these items are not handled in the next 15 years, we're going to be in quite seriously up shit creek.
I don't even think it's that long, honestly.
I suspect Michael is correct there, and I suspect Michael is correct, and I think that these systems need to be fixed. I'm in perfect agreement with all of these things that you're saying, Stefan, and I believe that these systems must be fixed soon, and we have to have a stake in this country. Zoomers and early or late millennials, who very often do not. I believe you're absolutely correct about this. I am trying to, but what I'm essentially saying here, where I'm not pressing on your beliefs because I think everything you said is correct. I am just bringing in the point that the solution here is not one of belief that the whole system can be overthrown and exchanged for one where we don't seek power or energy. Like every successful system, whether it be like post Gilded Age when the first Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy,
power aggregation always exists.
Yes, we can't exist in a system. I'm basically trying to like rip the communist point of view out from underneath itself before it can promulgate. Try to bring the point of view of like the average Zoomer out of that headspace, which I think will lead to more suffering than especially right now, and orient their energy into the knowledge that in order to have a system that functions correctly, it's one where more energy can be accumulated by the middle class and the lower middle class, not one where there is no energy whatsoever. That is essentially the point that I've been making since the get-go. That when you approach this issue that we have, this second Gilded Age that we exist in right now, and I think in the future that very well may be what this era is called. I think that if we don't have ourselves another Teddy Roosevelt who can bring property back to the hands of the lower and middle class, bring these sorts of things back, I think we're going to have a very serious issue. But nevertheless, the solution to the problem where my energy is going here is to say that we still need a system where we accumulate energy, and not one where there is no such thing. And that is what I am saying.
Right. And so what I'm completely agreeing with you here. You cannot create a system without the fundamental rules about energy and power. And so, without trying to control the conversation, later on, I wanted to bring up that I really feel like eventually we're going to have to start using energy, like literally the physical quantity of energy, the joule or whatever unit, you want to put there, a calorie, etc. We're eventually going to have to use that as our currency. We're going to eventually have to start looking at this from a material point of view, the only one that exists.
That is a
that is
really
congruent with reality.
interesting point of view that I don't even know that I've ever heard of before.
I've had this idea for a long time. I don't know if it came from me. I don't know if someone else had it before me. I'm certain that there have been. But like at the end of the day, a dollar, what it says is I can affect this much change, right? But that's not what it says because of what I just said earlier. In Louisiana, that dollar is worth a different amount than Illinois, and we're talking about the same dollar in the same country, and so on. I really feel like we're going to eventually have to monitor how much energy we use and how much energy we put back into society. Because I'm going to be honest with you, the claim that these people are working, 60-hour weeks and that they're doing something that we can't, wrong. Braid just told us that he's worked 60-hour weeks. I work 60-hour weeks, and so on.
So one aspect of this that I would just offer. Please, Michael.
The awful accusation I have here is you're both intelligent individuals who seem to be applying yourselves to paths that you know are not going to get you financial wealth.
That's literally what I was
going to say. So the intentionality of that is an idealism and not a pragmatic.
I mean, the phrase is work smart, not hard.
That's
I
where
don't
my
begrudge
criticism...
you the path choice, but I do begrudge you the idea that that you make that choice and you complain that you make the choice.
Right. So, but Michael, I would say this though. I've chosen a path of education. Education is seriously the most important thing humans do. We literally hand off the torch one generation to the next.
I agree with you.
In this country, we've decided that teachers need to make $45,000 a year. It's not tenable.
That's and that's a big.
My question to you. My question to you is, why are you not somehow involved in education reform? Or are you?
Say again?
Education reform policy.
We all are. We all vote in the ballot box.
I mean, very actively.
Right, but
I mean,
in terms of organization,
seat at the table, think tanks, etc.
Yes, and also like county events inside your community.
County events, local
showing
community
up
stuff.
And speaking at local.
Are you involved in those things?
Becoming like a known face in the name of like your local community as like this known person that does these things. I think that's what Michael was saying. It reminds me of a very early episode of ours.
The people who have that kind of time in the education world, make policies, etc. They're the ones that get, promoted. That's what you guys are talking about. But at the end of the day, it means nothing if a populace, votes the way that they do. And no matter how high up you go in, education world rungs or whatever, you're still beholden to the voter.
Sure, but I have to press on you there. Like, you have a part to play in this generation. Like, I know, like, there's a lot of people in this country, but you certainly have a part to play here. And by that, I mean that not only do you have a vote, but more importantly, you have a way of directing and communicating with the overall populace to make change in your local community.
Sure.
And it's hard to change. It's hard for you to decide who the next president of the United States is going to be. That's a very
who the head of education is or whatever at the federal level, but like you don't have to be there to affect the local community.
That's correct. You can make real tenable change in your local community. You can find out, like, for example, like who is not only your superintendent, but what is the underlying structure at which the education is handled in your local community, and what do you need to do to get more funding into your local schools to make sure that people, like, the students are getting their proper education, like enough of them are passing chemistry and are actually doing well in their courses to be able to go off and go to college. So those goals, but also to make sure the teachers get what they're worth. Like I will press on you here. I do think you can make this change. I don't think the nihilism of it's going to fail will suit you well. I think that you can fix these things or die trying, in which case you'll look quite lovely as you do it.
And look, And look, and I think we're all really in an agreement here. I think we're just standing on different sides of we're standing in different side or different parts of the yard on the same side of the fence, looking over and going, like giving different perspective. Because I absolutely agree with all of the points here. I think what we're looking at is, the question I'm asking is in agreement. Is in agreement with Trevor and Michael in the sense that it's recognizing the state that we're currently in, but also in an agreement with Stefan going, well, why is this the way that it is? Why is it that I feel like most people, if not everyone, would agree that education has immense intrinsic value? Not just, you don't, like I tell people all the time, I'm like, my collegiate education, yes, was in one part a means to get a job, but at the same time, what I learned and the experiences that I had at a university were almost more valuable to me than the piece of paper that I got at the end that tells somebody I'm qualified to work a certain position.
So,
and so
it's yep.
And I'm going to hand it back off to you. I'm just saying it's more of contemplating how have we existed in this country for so long and looked at education as a position with extreme value, but at the same time said these people really only deserve $45,000 a year.
So I do agree that high school teachers and generally speaking educators should be paid more in this country. We could speak a little bit to how this happened and how we got in this situation. I've heard one really interesting argument from this physicist. I forget his name, but he's from Japan initially. He's very famous. You'd know his face if you saw it. He spoke a little bit about H-1B visas. And generally speaking, the way that the system overall for the United States is functioned is we essentially brain drain the globe for our universities and our research centers. And the way that our academia functions is we bring in people from Japan and from China and from Europe, and they come and they live here and they fill in those gaps in terms of our ability to produce research and science. Now, I want to briefly mention this, and I think this could actually be really quite important for the next 10 years, is the removal of and the net loss now of immigrants into our country due to the socioeconomic world, the geopolitical situation going on in our country right now that we really shouldn't begin to get into. It would take too long. But I briefly want to mention that with that happening, we're going to see a pretty serious brain drain of our country, equal to with the loss of H-1B visa students entering our country. And I think right now is when the iron is hot to fix the high school and, generally speaking, primary education system in the United States. Because if we don't, we're going to suffer immensely. And that's both in terms of we're going to need to have much better educators, which comes with a much higher salary, as well as much more serious and stringent teaching system. And I think that's going to need to happen in the next 5, 6, 7 years. Because if we don't, you're going to see a brain drain and a loss of science output from the United States, the likes of which you've never seen. We'll do one of two things. We'll either try to actually fix the problem. That's it.
We're seeing it now.
It's already happening. It's been happening for at least a couple of years now.
So it's going to get much worse with the last year and a half of change.
Sure.
Seriously.
I just want to briefly, just say out loud, just going back to my point, why was there a gap in the first place? Well, why was there this, brain drain? Why did we have to do the brain drain operation in the first place? Americans are not stupid.
No, I agree.
It's just that, if you teach your children nothing, they're going to die.
I think part of the system, I think it's partly because many, many, many people want to come to the United States to go to our universities. And so that means that our universities, by and large, our public universities, don't have as much of an impetus and sensor to alert us when we have a lower educated populace as we otherwise could. If you have some other country, for example, that doesn't get a very large, whose people are widely uneducated compared to others, I think you get pretty well alerted of that when the universities are suffering as a result. And I think by and large, our universities have this influx of people that come across the world. Yes.
Competitive advantage and what your competitor doesn't have that you have is not only a benefit for you, but a negation for your competitor, which is the Google principle of paying your engineers obscene salaries so they don't go somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think the brain drain out the United States and funneling into places like India and China and the rest, as they get rejected from this place and they go into other places, people who would have brought something to our country. And we could speak a little bit about whether or not that's a good or bad thing. I think it should be stated that if we do actually do things that could actually fix our education system, we could evaluate that in good terms. But I think there are some very serious negatives as well. I mean, it's not like geniuses are easy to come by. And we're going to get all of the geniuses coincidentally in the United States now. You really don't know where to find them, and they're going to appear in very strange and miraculous places. And it is really quite unfortunate how we're in a situation now where we're not going to have them as readily available. Like that one Japanese physicist whose name I still don't place, but
Michio Kaku.
You're not talking about Michio Kaku.
Of course,
yeah.
Yes, I am. Okay. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah, he came here and he made I believe it was a particle smasher in his garage, and then he ended up here in the United States, and we may not see that as readily as we have in the last 30 years, and it's unfortunate.
You say geniuses are hard to come by, but I just want to put it out there, say it out loud, that even Einstein's, greatest revelations and greatest discoveries were still itty bitty steps. It doesn't take a genius level intellect. That's the point.
Also,
and so, the scientific process will continue unabated or restart, depending on how things go. And, but like I say, I mean, education is simply the most important thing we do.
Michael?
No, I was going to add something else, but I'd rather we get off this tangent and back on the main track.
Sure. Yeah, there's clearly a lot to be said in this avenue. So and as we're passing over the hour mark, I want to try to we'll skip over. I had some stuff on social media and performativity and stuff like that. But I want to try to close with the last question, and we'll just do a closing remark on that. But maybe try to hit one or two points in this avenue. I have a bullet point here. Why is art treated like a luxury? And you can replace art with anything that you find of intrinsic value. Why is education? Why is higher education treated as something that needs to be attained through extensive student loans? Why is art held to such a high degree that why is perhaps someone only considered a successful artist when they've sold a blue canvas for $1 billion? Why is all of these sort of different questions? And I made a note about NFTs and AI, opinions about these sort of NFTs, maybe not as important about why AI art irritates so many people, sort of these new, more upcoming things. And I think about this because almost every day I feel like I see an AI art post, and then I always go to the comments and people are irritated. And I ask myself, why are people irritated that an algorithm generated this
performative
image? What's performative, Michael? The comments or the
comments?
The comments? You think
99% of it's performative. You can have people with a semi. So I don't think most people are fundamentally serious. I'm just going to get on a box here real quick.
Sure.
I think plenty of people are more than happy to talk about whatever they care air quotes about, but the amount of action that I actually do see day to day from literally anyone about what they air quotes care about is very little other than talking about it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The most I see after that is perhaps they walk into a hotel lobby and click a button on a voting box, which I basically consider the same as talking about it. And then really after that, you get organized protests or the things that people don't really think about, which is like everything before a protest, which is organizing political movements and organizing like all this stuff, any sort of like putting memes into the noosphere and like actually getting people to like think something because they've been exposed to it from so many different avenues.
Sure.
But no, I don't think this is that people in comment sections are fundamentally serious.
Right. Well, and the reason that I bring that up is because the complaint is that a human being could have made this, or it's like we should value art created by human beings more because simply of the fact that it was created by a human being and not generated by a series of, complex algorithms that were trained on, a large data set, so to speak. And it feels like one of those things where it's like, okay, well, we're saying there's something about being a human being that makes the things that you make special. There's something intrinsically valuable about being a human being, that your creativity is important. And I would agree with that, because I necessarily have to as an artist. If I thought there was no value intrinsic to what I can create, then what is art really?
So let's get specific. So you're talking about a couple different types of value, but you're just saying value. So what you're talking about, we have the intrinsic value of art for the sake of art because it's a human expression, and from a human to art piece connection point, having that kind of resonance of emotion or experience through looking at somebody else's art or listening to it or whatever. That's one thing. What you're also talking about is the commercialization of art and its
Right.
value as a set piece, something to be glanced at for a moment to cue up certain impressions or ideas in the reader's mind or whatever the heck that particular medium happens to be. These are two very different types of value, and to say like these people in the comment sections being huffed about someone using AI art, I mean, okay, if you care so much about art, like, this is not the application of art for the sake of art. This is the application of art for the sake of having a little article
Right.
blip. Now, yeah, people are losing their jobs there, but people lost their jobs to the printing press. There's a degree of art as a profession, as a like stable, nice profession, historically didn't exist for anyone except for the aristocracy. Or if you got really lucky and you were like some sort of petty bourgeoisie and you went to get educated on doing art, and you had what's the word, the rich people who pay you to do art, they keep you on staff. I don't remember the name for that.
We all know what you're referring to.
But that model hasn't really shifted that much. You had a brief window where the commercialization of art, where people would make little tiny pieces to head an article on Washington Post or whatever. That window is disappearing. It wasn't there always, and you're just watching a wave crash into the floor.
Right.
So
I want to say very briefly though, Michael, that our species will survive the death of the printing press. It will survive the birth of the printing press, etc. But our species will not survive the death of human art. I'm sorry, but it's the truth.
Well, yeah.
I don't think that's so there are people who are trying to pivot that as like I made this thing, and that's fine. That's a weird, interesting rabbit hole to go down. But I don't think the argument 99% of the time it's coming from people who are like, this is jeopardizing my vocation. This is not coming from, this is jeopardizing art as valued as a human experience conveyance device.
And so what I'm really trying to say here is that, like I've been saying this entire afternoon, we have got to fundamentally shift our understanding of what is valued. Because again, if our species, if the members of our species can't express themselves, if we're going to deny ourselves that avenue of diversity and so on, I mean, again, we had music before language. So I mean, if we continue to limit ourselves like this, we're not going to make it.
So I briefly want to buttress what Michael said. One sentence, and then
I was just to say, let's hear from Trevor, and then we'll close out.
Sweet. Okay. So I was going to briefly say that this all kind of ties back to what I said earlier. The threat I wanted to make to humanities majors, that you're entering an extremely, immensely difficult field. Really, that's the reason why humanities is such a precarious thing to go into, and why your parents will live in fear when you tell them you want to go to grad school for English. It's because that by and large, the English majors, theater majors, art, anyone in the arts is destroyed by the system as it currently exists. And it's not to say that there's something wrong with the system. We could discuss that in detail. I would just briefly mention that is just an immensely difficult thing to be good at and to be recognized for. Welding is something that there is quite literally a pipeline you can go into it, or plumbing, whatever else. But when it comes to being an artist, that is an immensely difficult thing to get into, and it's always been so. It has always been so. It's not like you can go to a class anyway where they'll teach you how to be Michelangelo. They can help you immensely. You become such a better sculptor. But it's worth noting that finding a good sculptor, one that is truly recognized on that level, or really on any level recognizable enough to be able to have a full salary for, which is really all we're really trying to ask for in this conversation, I think, is just create a salaried, livable wage humanities pipeline, I suppose, a way of getting energy while being a humanities major. I would just state that that's something that's immensely difficult, and that's something that is immediately and readily available in our world, and not only in the United States, but I think quite literally anywhere. I think you have to be very good in order to actually. It's not a pipeline; it's a pyramid, and it's only people at the very tip that actually do something with that, such that they could even actually live off of it. And I think that's just a fact not of our society, but quite literally of just what is. And I think that's the reason why humanities can be such a scary thing. To tell your parents that you want to become an English major, like, shit, okay. All right, you want to do that? Okay. Would you mind doing 2 majors? Would you do 2? Would you double major? It's a concern. It's a serious concern. If I had a kid and they said they wanted to become an English major, I do think that they will have an extremely interesting and worthwhile time in their bachelor's and read beautiful things. It would make them a much more complex and interesting person. I do believe that is completely valid. But if I want them to survive and live well enough to take care of their loved ones, I would tell them to double major and do something else too. I'm serious about that.
I got you.
Very
I got
sincere.
you. All right.
Yeah,
Well, let's.
I don't want to continue on very long. I just want to say one thing to Trevor. Okay. I'm in the education system here in America, and you're totally right. We tell artists every day, hey, maybe you should have a backup plan, but we don't tell our ball players that. We you know what I'm saying? Like I'm sorry, but it's even harder to get into professional ball, and we are really, really interested in telling some young men and women you can make it, but it's not true. Just something to think about.
I agree.
Sure.
We should tell them that too. I agree.
Well, let's close out here, and in just maybe one brief sentence, ask yourself how the world or communities might change if we instead prioritized these sort of intrinsic values over what is perhaps profitable, what is entertaining in this aspect, which I think is very much built upon profit or things that are purely instrumental, however you want to view this. And I obviously have my views on this. It's definitely ideal. It's definitely utopian. And I wake up every morning and I wonder if that world is even possible. But I do take what Michael said to heart, that I probably should be doing more to see that world come to fruition. But yeah, so this is just what's been on my mind lately. So with that, a close. Trevor?
Right, I was just going to say, I could turn off the recording at this point?
Or yeah.
Close.
I mean, anything works at this point.
Yeah, if that's what you meant, then I'll turn off the recording.
That's fine.
Yeah, you can turn it off.
Not
All right.
a close.
A close.
Yeah, cut it off there.
Cut it off.
Cut it off there.
Shut it down.
All right, there you go. All right. Peace.
Bye.